Hello, good morning. We're ready to start with our webinar on COVID-19 and the role of the Board of Directors. Thank you so much. Welcome to this webinar series. This is the second webinar series that will lead us to Sustainability Week. Sustainability Week is the IDB Invest flagship event on ESG, environment, social, and governance. And we're very happy to have all of you here. We hope everyone is well in this and staying healthy in this strange and unprecedented times that we are living today. My name is Marta Viegas. I'm the head of the corporate governance practice at IDB Invest. And I would like to start the webinar by introducing our panelists. But first, before introducing our panelists, a few logistic rules. Thank you for everyone who's participating. I hope you find our discussions today useful in your realities on the ground. All microphones and videos of the participants are turned off. We will have a 15-minute time for questions and answers in the end of the panel. The chat is opened. Please send your questions and comments throughout the presentation in the comment box. We will make our best to answer the questions in the end of the session. So this is where you send your questions and we'll get to them in the end. We will be recording this webinar and we will be making it available in our website. Our website is www.idbinvest.org/sustainability-corporate governance. And as to our panelists, joining today are Gabriel Azevedo. Gabriel is the Division Chief of ESG, Environment, Social, and Corporate Governance at IDB Invest. Mauro Rodrigues da Cunha. He's an experienced independent board member. He currently holds the position of chairman of the board of Caixa Econômica Federal. Caixa is the largest government-owned bank in Latin America. He is also the chairman of the audit committee of Eletrobras, which is Latin America's largest power utility company. And he is the member of the board of BR Malls, a company that invests in malls and real estate. TOTUS is a software company, and Klabins is one of the leading paper producers, exporters, and recyclers in Brazil. We have José Joaquim Moura is an entrepreneur. He is the founder and chairman of Farmalisto, an online pharmacy platform designed to facilitate access to medicine and services. His company operates in Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, and has been backed by venture capital and is in financing rounds now. And José González Campo is the Director of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability of Corporación Multiinversiones. Corporación Multiinversiones is one of the largest companies in operating in Central America. José Joaquim González Campo is also leading the crisis committee of CMI. CMI is one of the most important economic groups in Central America. It operates in 14 countries with more than 45,000 employees. CMI Alimentos, its larger operations, includes livestock, flour mills, and fast food. And then with thanks to our panelists, I would like to pass the word to Gabriel. Gabriel?
Thank you, Martha. Good morning to our participants. Thank you so much for being with us at this webinar. I hope it's useful. My very personal thanks to Mauro Cunha, José Moura, and José González for giving a little bit of their time and their experience to be with us. It is a great panel we have, I think, a very experienced board member like Mauro, and then two business leaders of sectors that are so vital during this pandemic, the pharmaceutical sector and the agri-food sector. So we are privileged to have you here. As all of you know, the situation has been evolving very, very quickly. You can see on this graph the impact on the economies in the region, with a few scenarios vary from moderate to extreme, all of them substantially below the baseline trend that we had for GDP growth in Latin America. This is obviously going to have impacts. Can we have the next slide, please? Up to now, and I think these are very recent today's data, there have been in the 26 countries in the region over 355 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with an unfortunate toll of confirmed 20,000 plus deaths. These statistics, as all of you know, are statistics that may be misrepresented for the deficiency involved in the different data systems and on the different countries' capacities to test cases. But our goal here is not so much to talk about the number of cases and deaths, but rather from the IDV Invest perspective, be close to our clients and to key stakeholders in the regions, and to provide the support we can in terms of the process of decision-making and the adoption of appropriate measures to manage risks impacting their businesses during the COVID. Impacts to businesses are impacts to hundreds and thousands of families that depend upon this business for their livelihoods, be it through direct jobs or as part of supply chains, suppliers, or participants in the value chain. The guide that you have before you and that we're discussing today was developed with a focus on board of directors. It's not a requirement, it's not a prescription. We developed it as a tool to help our clients who are trying to build effective responses to the pandemic. The guide is primarily focused on the role of board of directors, high-level leadership, but it can be used by all senior members or leaders of a company, as well as investors, as it includes recommendations in dealing with governance, strategy, and oversight challenges, as well as stakeholder engagement. The short-term effects of the crisis are being felt right now. Health and safety at the workplace, liquidity concerns, supply chain disruptions, IT issues, legal and regulatory changes. They are, nevertheless, medium and long-term effects that requires strategy and preparation. So we also want to talk not about the emergency per se, but thinking strategically in the medium, in the long term. What's next when we are able to think of the future and thinking of rebuilding our businesses and the economies in which they operate. While boards need to leave management in charge of the crisis response and give management the flexibility to act, in their role overseeing operations, directors and board members need to take charge of the medium and long-term strategic planning to restore the companies to health. This guidance does not provide an exhaustive list of answers, which naturally depend on the various situation that each company faces in each country, region, or local context. legal and regulatory frameworks vary widely. However, the guide does help to raise questions. In addressing the questions posed by the guide, directors and board members will be better positioned not only to craft a short-term response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but to carry on with their business in the post-pandemic reality. With that, I thank you again for your participation, and I pass the word back to Martha. Thank you. Martha.
Thank you, Gabriel. I appreciate this.
Thank you, Gabriel.
In this, in this situation, the guide has governance recommendation and questions. The recommendations are divided into what are governance framework, the governance framework that is needed, the financial and business impact in the company, and the need for shareholders and stakeholders engagement. Then we present questions in the guide. First questions that can be asked by investors, shareholders that are invested in the companies, and then questions that can be asked by the board itself, which really are intended to make an evaluation on how prepared is the company, how well the company is responded, and what to do in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term in the company. And those questions are really to react with precision, speed, confidence, liquidity concerns, the supply chain concerns, of course, the impact with the workforce, work remotely, and the relationship in the various workforce and committees, governance committees in that company, so the information is flow. So I don't want to take a lot of time in the publication itself. The publication is in our website and you will receive from us. What I do want to do is to turn the word to our panelists so they can share their own experiences in the ground. So I want to take, I want to pass the word now to Mauro, and I'm going to ask the same question to all of the panelists. And first, I would like to know the on-the-ground experience with us. Passing first the question to Mauro, and then to Jose Joaquin Moura, and then to Jose Gonzalez Campo. What have been the main challenges in the industries that you're involved with? Mauro, not only you have the experience as a board member in several industries, from banking to software to malls and real estate and manufacturing, but you've been as chairman with Caixa, which has been instrumental in the Brazilian crisis response. So tell us what you have been facing and in your experience on that. And then after that, we pass to the other panelists. Can we start the discussion now, please?
Okay, Martha, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, trying to share a little bit of what we're seeing on the ground. As you mentioned, I sit on boards in very different industries, and we're seeing very different impacts. So this sea change that is affecting everybody's lives is affecting it in different ways. And companies must recognize the situation they're in and act accordingly. Now, the role of the boards in each company varies a lot, and it depends on the governance structures already in place. And this is what we have. Of course, it'd be great if everybody had great governance structures. It is not true for everybody, but we have to work with what we have. We'll talk a little bit more later on today about the dynamics on the boards. But looking at the impacts, we're seeing some industries that are dramatically affected and even have their survival at stake, while others are actually seeing an increase in business. And it's not just the anecdotal Google and Facebook and Amazon, but some other industries in between as well. So from my personal example, the first that comes to mind is the case of Klabin. It produces paper and pulp and notably packaging paper. And the company is doing great. We just released the first quarter results. EBITDA went up and orders are up. So management was very upbeat in the perspectives so far. And here we're talking about a company that produces essential goods and is being positively affected by the devaluation of the real. Here again, we have to look at these things both from an operating point of view and also from a balance sheet point of view. So the main focus for a company like Klabin is to make sure that your supply chain works and understands your bottlenecks and the risks for disruption of that supply chain. So again, not only because it's important for the company, but if you're producing essential goods, it's important for the country and for the population as a whole. The biggest impact for Klabin was the interruption of maybe the biggest industrial project going on in Brazil right now, which is Puma II, the 9 billion reais project. We stopped work on it, but we are already resuming with new rules and care to make sure that we minimize the risk of contamination. And in this case, the board had one extraordinary meeting in the beginning of the crisis and receives now very detailed weekly bulletins that have empowered the boards to really know what's going on. Also, Klabin is very strong in the social responsibility side. It's making important donations in terms of medical equipment, supplies, and infrastructure to the public sector. And an important issue is that the board has accountability on this process, not only on deciding on the nation, but on the governance of the nations. The second case I wanted to point out is the case of TOTUS. TOTUS is an IT company. It has ERP, CRM, and other business software. So here we're seeing some negative impact, but very muted when we compare to other industries, and notably to some clients of TOTUS. So here we're talking about recurring revenue, recurring business, and a business that companies need even more now to be technologically up to speed to deal with all the new dynamics of business. So TOTUS is in a good position to pass well by the crisis, and also looking strategically at how the world will be after the crisis in a much more integrated and much more IT intensive world. So the board is also having weekly meetings in this case, in addition to several reports we receive, and the company even decided to repurchase stock, not in a major way and not in a way that affects share price, but really as a recurring process, as we do have stock grants that we plan to make over the next few years. Third case is Eletrobras. Eletrobras is an utility, so relatively protected as well. However, we're seeing a major tectonic shifts in the electricity sector in Brazil, as the clients are having problems. So not only clients that are connected to distribution company, but also the so-called free clients. Demand is falling a lot. So the total power produced in Brazil last week was 10% below the previous week. This is huge for the industry as a whole. And we will generate problems for those companies that are closer to the consumer. And eventually there will have to be some sort of new agreement. And there's already projects in Congress to deal with that. So Eletrobras owning 35% of the power generation in Brazil is not immune to that. And we are monitoring cash flow very carefully, but also monitoring the strategic assets the company has. It's almost 300 strategic assets that need to be serviced. You can't do home office work in a nuclear plant, for example, and the logistics involved in making sure that these assets are taken care of throughout Brazil, which is a huge country, is a major effort, and the board is overseeing that. So here the board gets daily reports, get regular interactions with management over WhatsApp, and we had one extra presidential meeting. One of the most dramatic situations is in shopping centers. BR Malls is the largest shopping center company in Brazil, and suddenly revenues virtually went to zero. So the company needs to reinvent itself, both short-term and long-term. It's being quite transparent to the public, to investors, and accelerating a process that was already taking place before, which is the digital transformation, making sure that even as a shopping center company, we provide integration of the online and offline world for all of our clients. We do have some shopping centers that are already opening in Brazil, very slowly and very carefully. They're serving as a training ground for when it all opens up again in the future. The company is supporting its tenants, mostly small shop owner or franchisees that have very little working capital. So we are postponing rental payments, and BR Malls took up 700 million reais in extra capital lines to go through this phase. So this is a case where the new normal will be very present. It was already in the strategic agenda of the board, but it increases importance. So we are thinking, for example, how people will think about going to the movies in the future, how much the e-commerce is accelerating with this crisis. So there will be a lot of transformation here, and the board needs to be prepared for that. The company made a very bold decision not to fire any employees short term. And as a matter of fact, none of the companies where I'm sitting on boards have fired anyone in any major way other than the normal churn. In the case of BR Malls, both executive directors and non-executive directors are getting pay cuts, and some employees are being furloughed, but they're getting not only the government support, but also an extra payment from the company, which means that for lower earners, they're getting almost the same as they got before. Now, in the case of Caixa, and I have one more minute to go here, from a banking side, this is a bank in an excellent situation. We have a Basel rate close to 20, a very high liquidity, and an asset base comprised mostly of real estate loans, which are very resilient. And the fact that the bank is delaying payments on some installments for 6 months ensures that we will not have any problems. And quite the opposite, Caixa is well positioned to provide credits, and it's doing it both for individual and smaller firms, and steering clear, which it was already doing from large corporate loans. Of course, what gets a lot of attention in the media is the payment of the emergency loan, and this is quite a challenge. So Caixa is a mere operator of it, and I can have opinions as to whether the payment was well structured or not. But the fact of the matter is that Caixa was given a mission to pay 50 million Brazilians, many of whom had no banking relationship whatsoever. Many didn't even have a taxpayer ID number. And we are going about doing this with the intensive use of technology. There's a video on YouTube as to how we're doing this over a cloud platform. And it's perhaps one of the biggest payments in terms of number of individuals in history. Are there problems? Yes, there are problems. Some technology glitches, even though, again, the sheer size of traffic is unprecedented. And my personal opinion is that we're having few problems in relation to the size of the challenge. And the traffic, the foot traffic on branches is something that has a lot to do with the low financial literacy of the population. And go to the branch, and they didn't even need to go to the branch. And it is a consequence of how the payments were structured. So Caixa has even executive directors going to the branches to help sort out the problem, and working with the governments to smooth the payment flows. Now, it is a very clear advantage that Brazil has an institution like Caixa with this huge branch network to reach the very interior of Brazil. So this is a broad view of the challenges over the industries where I'm participating. I'll stay here sticking to my 10 minutes, Martha, and we can discuss some more in the next few minutes.
Fantastic, Mauro. I really appreciate your overview. This is really eye-opening, because I think every industry has a different challenge, and you're in industries that are affected in very different ways. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I would like to pass the word to Jose Mora. Jose is, as I mentioned, he is an entrepreneur. He's the owner and the chairman of Farmalisto. Farmalisto is an online pharmacy platform. And Jose, can you tell us what has been the impact of COVID-19 in the business of Farmalisto? Jose, I think you're in mute. Can you unmute Jose Mora?
Yeah, I was on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Someone was controlling the sound. So thank you very much, Marta. Let me start by introducing myself, Jose Mora. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for many years. I was the head of Johnson & Johnson Pharma business for Latin America, and left to start my first experience as an entrepreneur, starting a pharmaceutical company that was divested 7 years later. And then that was followed by Farmalisto. Farmalisto is an online healthcare platform focusing on delivering prescription products nationwide to all our patients. We operate, as was said at the beginning, in Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. And what we try to do is to deliver pharmaceutical products at the best possible price in a very short period of time in the key cities, in particular in Colombia, Mexico City. We have in 17 cities, we deliver in less than 45 minutes the most demanded products. In addition to that, we focus on the chronic products so that people can have access to medicines all across the country. We always deliver full prescription, and we try to deliver always at the best prices, and we guarantee the best possible price. In addition to delivering medicines and prescription products, we also in Pharmalisto offer healthcare services at home. And that was very interesting because delivering products at home and delivering healthcare services at home in this COVID-19 pandemic became a very important opportunity for Pharmalisto. Different from some things that we have heard, people had to stay at home, and therefore medicines had to be delivered. All the masks and gloves and the requirements that people had to move, normally they purchased from us, and our business started to change dramatically in a very short period of time. In my case, as a board member, as the CEO of the company, and also in the middle of a fundraising process that we had started at the end of last year, December of last year, meant that there were several very important activities and responsibilities. We are a small company. We have so many committees, so we had to create a couple of working groups. One, as a CEO, to make sure that we were operating properly in a way that we required a fast analysis and in rapidly changing scenarios. In addition to that, we needed to create a group to coordinate the fundraising process because that continued and it required a lot of information. So my lessons learned in this case is that we had to make rapid decisions in a very uncertain scenario, make decisions and implement them fast. As a CEO and with my team, the first decisions I think important are regarding the employees. We must create and maintain our company culture. We must communicate properly to our employees, and first of all, to guarantee, to make sure that they understand that they had no problems in their job stability. We not only didn't have to let go any people, but we had to hire additional people in a very, very fast way that was not very typical. In addition to that, we had to follow a lot of government guidelines that changed almost daily, and we had to make sure that happened without any problem with the government. Regarding customers, we experienced a very abnormal high demand, and therefore we had to support that demand with changing our business process, having the people, we had a call center that we were able to let go to their homes to do their home office work before it was mandated by the government. So we had plenty of time to take their computers, put all the security to each of our different call center agents so that they were working properly without any risk for the company, and change the whole dynamics and setup of our company to increase double the size of the distribution center and the picking and packing and preparing all the different orders. We also had to create a customer follow-up system so that many orders that came dramatically fast, we had to deliver them and to support our customers. In addition to that, our communication with suppliers became very important. We have to understand how they operate, were they willing to or able to supply us. Our business model is a very innovative business model where we have very good partnerships with our suppliers, and therefore we use part of their inventory, so we had to have working in combination with them in a very important way. Regarding the board of the company, which was my other responsibility as a CEO, we had a continuous communication, basically weekly and more than probably twice or three times a week, making sure we understand and communicated what we were doing, how we were operating, taking all the precautions regarding safety of our employees who had to work in the office. We even developed a program by which some of the key employees for warehousing were staying at a hotel that was offered to them, and if they took it, we paid all the expenses, and the employees would stay at a hotel to avoid any risk of contamination. In addition to that, and as I was saying, we created the fundraising committee, which I also chaired, and I had to take part in all of these activities all the time. So these weeks of COVID-19 for us have been quite interesting, because even though there's a lot of home office work, the amount of work has dramatically increased, and the organization and decision making also means a very fast process. I believe the other important thing is that we have to not only make fast decisions with very limited information, but very good communication, assuring the employees that they're in a company that they used to go every day, and now we have to call on them, making sure they understand at home that they are important, that we care for them, and that the company is doing okay, and they're not going to lose their work or anything. In the warehouse, all the process changed, and we did something very innovative that was very much useful in our PR campaigns. Since we had to hire people in a very fast way, we talked to some companies that had to let go very good people. And instead of that company letting go the people, we will pay the company for their people with all expenses paid, all salaries, and we will use the people in our company. So that way, the company did not have to let go anyone, and the people were forwarded to our company to operate. That was something accepted and very well seen by the community and by many of the other companies, and we had a lot of good PR on that. In addition to that, we had several processes that had to be changed, because we needed to generate good PR for the image of the company, as a company was supporting everybody. We implemented telemedicine as part of the services, so that with telemedicine, doctors did not have to go to visit our patients, and patients could get all the advice and the need all across the country in moments where they were quite, let's say, feeling alone, and many times at home without anybody to support them. I think that those are, let's say, the positive things that in our case, in Farmalisto, came from the COVID-19 experience. And basically, it was a real fast decision-making process and a great change that we had never previously thought could happen. And at the end, our e-commerce business was benefited from, because we were in the right place at the right time, I believe, with medicines, healthcare services at home, which was needed by the people in general. So I don't know if this covers part of this, my question, Marta, and try not to take too much time.
Thank you so much, Jose. I think you mentioned something that I like very much, is that when crisis unfolds, the management, the CEOs, are pressured very much to take immediate actions, communicate responses very quickly, and even when the full scope of the crisis is not yet known. But many of those actions may risk taking the organization culture away, and then what you have to do is to maintain that culture alive and recognize that the skills, the capabilities, the experience of the people are still there on the long term. So that's interesting. So with that, I would like to call on Jose Gonzalez Campo and ask the same question. What's going on with CMI? CMI acts on many industries, the food industry, utilities, real estate as well. So it's a huge corporation, and you're director of corporate affairs and also leading the crisis committee. So tell us what you're seeing at CMI and the impact of the crisis.
All right. Thank you, Marta and IDB, for this opportunity. It's always, for us, we very much appreciate the opportunity to share our experience, but above all, to learn from others. Please bear with me on my English. It's always very hard to follow two very good presentations with a lot of specifics that we heard from Mauro and Jose. These are obviously very challenging times without precedent. So we really need to learn together and try to overcome and move forward doing better. Having heard Jose and Mauro's presentations, I think we share very similar challenges. So I will try to look at them from a more broadband view and maybe with less specifics, but with a more conceptual basis. As you already explained, Marta, CMI is a multi-Latin family-owned corporation based in Guatemala with operations in Central America with two main business groups, foods and capital. Our principal business are in the animal protein, poultry and pork, flour and pasta, restaurants, real estate, and renewable energy. So as you may imagine, we have been affected in many, many fronts. Let's talk about a little bit about what's going on today. Response to this situation has been different in each country in which we operate. Thankfully, as of today, we have not seen yet a health crisis in which hospitals are overwhelmed. And you have to realize that we do not have in our region a very well-developed and strong health systems, and that our governments don't really have the capacity to react to a situation like this as in other geographies or more developed countries. I should point out, however, that our governments in the region took decisive and early action, and I think that was critical when we see the amount of people getting sick or even deaths. Overall, the measures relate basically to a stay-home order, curfews in some cases, and the closing of non-essential economic activity. In our case, in CMI, we had our first employee contracting COVID-19 in March 28th. And as of yesterday, we presented 43 cases, most of them in the US, and 9 in the Dominican Republic. To be very honest, I do not think many people even imagine for something like this to happen and hit the world as hard as it has. And if we had them, our contingency and crisis plans were not designed for the scale of this situation. So we are in front of a crisis we have never seen before, in which health continues to be the primary concern, but each passing day, people are looking more and more at their economy with a lot of questions and anxiety. COVID-19, in a way, is a threat that is affecting all of us directly one way or the other. So much of what I plan to share with you relates to people and our mind frame looking at business from that perspective and the way that our board has been operating in that regard. At the corporate level, we started monitoring the spread of COVID-19 since the beginning of the year and expanded our crisis management protocols by the end of February. The unprecedented effects on society and the economy led us to coordinate with international and regional health organizations, governments, our stakeholders, other companies, and most importantly, we decided to increase our communication with our employees and their families. First of all, we understood that it was a very unique situation that needed a different crisis management organization, which I think we will cover in the next question. So I will get into that later. But I think the most important thing that we did and our board asked us to do together was to define clearly our goals in the situation. Number one, the safety and health of our coworkers, their families, our stakeholders was a priority from the start. Then the second goal was the continuity of our business operations. And I would like to make a point here, and I think both Mauro and Jose pointed out this in a way. But when we talk about putting people first, we need to think about the person as a whole, and we need to consider all their needs and concerns. We all understand, I think, that we always should have as a priority the well-being and health of our people and their families. But it's also a very important part of our responsibility as business to keep providing opportunity for people to earn their living and prosper through good jobs and the supply of our products and services. In our case, in the food industry, that was one of the main challenges. But I think as a whole, the effort to retain jobs and keep keep the jobs going is really, really very important. But health and keeping jobs are not mutually exclusive. We do not have an on and off switch between thinking health and jobs. People have economic needs, and we all have a responsibility to do our best to try to balance both going forward. With that in mind, we started a strong communications campaign in preventative hygiene and health measures. We limited traveling and meetings, and before even the government took actions, we invited people to stay home and promote remote work. But more than an operational challenge, we believe this effort should have a very humane approach. People need to feel safe, and I think that's what's changed a lot managing crisis. This is a people issue. Our challenges in this regard were multiple. First of all of our coworkers that were able to work from home, we needed to make sure that they had the equipment, systems, and technology to do so and to help them in this transition. And as I'm sure for many of you, working from home is not easy. We are learning to do that. Secondly, with the growth of cases, we decided to shut down our restaurants, with the exception of drive-thru and delivery, and all of our shopping centers, a measure that was later ordered also by the government. What this meant was for many of our people to be sent home because they didn't have any option to do their job physically. We have not let go of anybody. We have kept paying salaries, but it's been 2 months now, and the financial burden of salaries and costs without income is a really big challenge. And finally, in our food operations, that because of the essential nature that they have to provide for food safety and supply, we continue working and kept the plants going with the obvious concerns and mobility limitations our people had to endure due to government decisions, while making sure that we could do so in a safe and healthy way. So again, uncertainty and anxiety were our main concerns. So the solidarity and support for our employees was and continued to be a priority. And in addition, all our stakeholders were entitled to useful information from us with 3 basic principles: honesty, transparency, and empathy. Managing these past weeks in life and work conditions with a 24-hour news cycles is also a big challenge today. Getting accurate information while managing social media, chats, and rumors is not easy when the health of our families are at stake. So we constantly try to hear from scientists and health professionals to provide the most accurate information with credibility. We established a personal psychology and healthcare line dedicated to give tranquility and peace of mind to our employees. We also felt we had an obligation to help others, the less fortunate in society. So sharing best practices with others, articulating our efforts with other companies to maximize greater social impact has been a priority for us. In our case, we focus on giving equipment for the health system, donations to hospitals and public servants, providing meals for essential workers, and support a fundraising effort for basic supplies for people most affected in this crisis. The dimension of this crisis requires being simple and effective due to the simultaneous impact in the countries where we operate. As Jose just said, quick decisions and really without taking our view of long-term is really very important. This required obviously new and unprecedented coordination structures between our business, support for employees, and society in general. It's been a real challenge to adapt, to monitor and adapt to the different changes in regulatory measures in each of our countries. Those are essential. And also trying to expand our attention to active listening to the environment with the greatest social intelligence available. In summary, facing a crisis that is not only having an impact on health, focusing on our people and their families is very important. And understanding that there will be, and we are beginning to see, a lot of important economic consequences, not only in business, but with our coworkers. This situation requires not only agile decision-making, but being very creative in having plans that ensure operational continuity, and especially again, the well-being of our people. Thank you, Marta.
Thank you. This was enlightening. It is indeed a people issue. It is indeed a people issue, and the way that you address this issue does have the potential of causing a significant financial strain in the company, and how do you address that in the long term? And the new normal, as Mauro mentioned, and the management of the business from now on, considering all the stakeholders. This is what we're facing with. So thank you very much, and I'll ask a new round of questions now, taking in consideration everything that you shared with us. And the second round of questions relates really to focus more on actually corporate governance structures. I want to know the role of the board and the company's leadership. What has been your experience in relating to the structures? I thought it was interesting that you mentioned the no crisis management plan that was in place already, was ready for this. But what had been your experience with the role of the board, the committees that were or not, or that were in place or were created for that, the communication between board and management, the equilibrium of strategy on oversight on the crisis response, the need to be of the board to be very present, but also ensure that the management has ability to move very quickly and take action. The transparency and a good relationship here is key, and how really to maintain the corporate culture alive in this scenario. So the actual governance framework. So if we may begin again with Mauro, and then Jose Mora, and then Jose Gonzalez, can you address that, Mauro?
Yes, Marta. I'm going to try to share my screen here, and just a second to make sure that I think. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, I think it may be coming up now. But I'm going to share perhaps 6 concepts here, some of which are very obvious, some are maybe less obvious. Hopefully, in conjunction, they'll be useful. So, can you see the screen now?
No.
No.
That's okay. That's okay. Let's go without the screen. So the first item really is the frustration of not being on the front line. Most of us are or were executives, and this means that we want to help and make things happen, but it's not always possible. So we have to deal with this frustration. Second is the value of humility. And Jose mentioned that things are moving really, really fast. We need to make decisions in a pace that we never thought possible before. And I think we have to know what we don't know. And this perhaps now may be working?
Yes, we can see now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so the humility part has a consequence, which is the star CEO is a problem when we're living something like this, because the relationship between management and board has to be working well. It needs to be a team effort. So no single individual can possibly solve everything. And I think this team approach is important. From a director point of view, this may be also obvious, but sometimes we forget. And I think there's a question in the roster that relates to it, which is the first step is not to be a problem and start calling the CEO every day and trying to put the fingers in, not only the nose in, as the director is supposed to do. So it's a fine line that the director must thread here. And this is proving to be an opportunity for boards to mature. Now, the next one may be a less obvious one, which is good boards became better and worse boards became worse. So we're seeing really the value of good boards in terms of having the correct skill set, the correct processes to work together with management to try to solve problems on a daily basis sometimes. And here the trust in this CEO board relationship is key, because without it, it becomes very unproductive and doesn't allow us to focus on the problems at hand, which are huge. Okay, so the next point, and maybe a little bold, which is the perception that risk management failed. And I'm not saying that, oh, okay, nobody had in their risk map the possibility of this a pandemia, of this global emergency. Maybe some people did, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm very many steps prior to that, which is it's very hard to get board airtime to discuss risk management, especially outside of the financial sector. So I think we failed, and from now on, we need to give more attention to risk management. Again, it's not to say that we're going to include COVID on our risk maps. This is in the past. Companies will have the temptation, okay, so when we go back to normal, let's all insure against global emergencies like this. No, this is not the right time to do it, because insurance will be prohibitively expensive by then. But we need to give more attention to risk management. And one of the things that dissertation would bring is importance of Slack. So all the streamlining that we lived in the past are claiming their price now. And I remember when I started serving on boards, one of the very first was the fiscal board of WEG, an industrial company in Brazil. And the company was always bad-mouthed because they had excess cash in their balance sheets, a lot. And as a recent graduate from an MBA, I thought I was really smart to say, you should optimize your balance sheet here. And I was given a lecture on the value of having Slack in a volatile country like Brazil. And WEG is a testimony of the survival of the fittest, which doesn't necessarily mean this limits the balance sheet and just in time everything. So Slack is important and needs to be built in to business model to serve as a contingency, because by definition, we will not know what this contingency will be. I'm lucky enough because the companies I serve on have a lot of financial flexibility for different reasons. Either they had fortress balance sheets, or they had easy access to capital markets. And here, the corporate model of the true corporation without a controlling shareholder is proving very, very valuable, not only for the flexibility for you to raise equity if you want, but also the proximity of capital markets and being a frequent issuer of bonds. This has a lot of that. Now, talking about ESG, I'd like to use Warren Buffett's line here that only when the tide goes out, you discover who's been swimming naked. So lots of companies pay a lot of lip service to ESG, especially the S in this case. And the first instinct that we see is, okay, let's fire 10% of our employees. We see executives that are so focused on their financial metrics that even on the face of a crisis like this, their instinct was, okay, let's fire people. Fortunately, when in the few situations where that happens, this has been averted, but it speaks a lot about culture. You don't see culture every day just by looking at the chart on the wall. You see culture in critical moments like this. And so if you identify this type of culture, then this gives you some homework on how to improve it in the future after this crisis is all over, which it will hopefully be sooner rather than later. Now, we see a lot of companies making donations and making some beautiful commitments. And in some cases, there's a lot of PR involved and very little effective action. So I praise the companies that are focusing on effective social work rather than splashy press releases. And I'm not saying that companies affiliated to the Novo Mercado are not doing the right things, but I'm saying that some companies are too interested in the marketing aspect rather than the results. And finally, again, Jose mentioned the fast decision-making process. I think we will have to rethink the whole idea of scenario planning and strategic planning. In one of the companies I served, I approved the budget when the crisis had already struck. So we knew that this budget had to go straight to garbage and do a new one. But the processes for doing this are slow. So today we're revising budgets on a weekly, sometimes on a daily basis. Of course, this is not something we want to do on a recurrent basis, but we need to have the ability to do it. We need to be flexible and have a new discipline, rethink the whole idea of strategic planning and budgeting in our companies. I'll stop here for this point and stop sharing my screen, and I hope it works this time.
Thank you. You mentioned, I like very much the quote of, it's when the tide goes down that you really realize who's swimming naked. There's another quote that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in his moments of comfort and convenience, but when he stands in times of challenge and controversy. That was Martin Luther King. So it's the same aspect, and which also speaks to what was said here before on this is a crisis of people, and you have to. When you mention ESG, this is the social aspect of the ESG, and this is the culture. How do you keep culture alive? And if you don't have that cushion, but reality may be a lot harsher than that. And I also liked your point on the strain that the crisis has put in the relationship of the board and the management. So good board has become better and bad boards have become worse. And I see that in other teams and other relationships as well. The relationship is going well. It has the potential of improvement. If not, it has the potential of causing more strain. So this is also a good lesson learned. And with that, I pass the word to Jose Mora. Jose, can you share a little bit of the governance and the decision-making process? I think especially in your case, with the need of raising capital and in your company is smaller, so I believe that in some aspects this is easier, but in others not so much. So just share with us a little bit of the governance.
Thank you, Marta. Well, I think Mauro did a great job on saying activities of the board. So I will just add a few things that I think can complement what he said. But I think that the continuous communication is very important. But I believe that the board can bring into the table a lot of support on ways of seeing things in a different scenario, in a different company. So this learning that the board can have can help us in our particular business to learn and to have different perspectives that can help make better decisions. The other point that I mentioned, and I cannot stress enough, is that this is fast decision making. I mean, there are points that if you start analyzing too much, you're going to miss everything. And so I believe that is where the CEO has to have good communication, but limit, I believe in my case, you have to limit the communication somewhat so that you can also, as a CEO, work into and start developing what is the new normal. So I believe that we have to discuss with the board on the new activities that have that are going to be the normal way to work with this new world that we're already living in. Many times we have not even noticed how the world has changed dramatically, and we already are working in this new normal. In our case, as an e-commerce platform in pharmaceuticals and healthcare services at home, well, the coronavirus pandemic caused a lot of things. I believe that, first of all, it accelerated in a way that we could not have predicted the business model that we had. So we were with the right business model, I believe, but probably this was going to take many years to get the acceptance that we require from the patients and possible customers. And this was accelerated dramatically in a few weeks, in 1 month or something like that. So we have to now identify the way we're working in a different new business model, and what are the advantages that we have, what are the new things that we have to develop, how can we support the community, our patients in a better way, and we have to make very fast decisions on that. For example, now people will obviously like to have the full prescription at home across the country, but healthcare services people don't want to go to hospitals. So we cannot only think on COVID-19, we have to think on the metabolic syndrome, we have to think on elderly patients that need to have support and that they don't want to go to the hospital, they have a risk on going to the hospital. And in addition to that, the hospitals are not even taking care of them. As Jose Gonzalez mentioned, our countries in Latin America don't have all the resources that are required in the healthcare services. So some people are facing a lot of uncertainty at home, and we must support these people. I believe that this is a responsibility we have as a community. We can do it. We have the process to do it. We have the technology to do it. So that is what has been changing. And I think that this is going to give us a great opportunity to support the community. In addition to that, I believe that we have a lot of information. Artificial intelligence has become a key issue, and we have so much information from the patients that we have that we need to use it in a way that we can predict, or at least be a little bit ahead of new risks in epidemiological studies, understand what can happen in the near future, support the government, support other pharmaceutical companies in what they have to manufacture. And that can come from trends in the information on what is happening with the patients that we have. We can also support in clinical studies, and we can predict demand and predict the future in a way that with the access to the information that has come as a result of this pandemic, I think puts us in a very strong position. In addition to this, I believe that there's another point that I think is quite important, is alliances, non-traditional alliances. You never think of being having a partnership with one of your main competitors, but in this case, probably you can find ways to work with key competitors to deliver products fast, to support each other to make sure that at the end, the inefficiencies of the systems are destroyed by working together. And I believe that although this is something atypical and not very common, I believe that there's an opportunity now for these type of things. We have a demand generation healthcare alliances with other companies like the Rappies of the world, or these kind of companies that generate demand, and we can support them and deliver to the patient fast. In addition to this, I also believe that the opportunity for technology is going to help us, let's say, link ourselves to other suppliers, to other demand generators, to the hospitals, to the patients, and using technology properly, you can monitor patients, you can support the patient, and change your business model in a much more efficient way. So technology for me enables the implementation of these models that probably were not seen so close to the days to today. These partnerships are quite important, and we also, I believe, looking ahead, that we can develop a new way of doing business. People are not able to go to the pharmacy, for example, to buy a product because they cannot leave home. In our country, in Colombia, people over 70 cannot leave their homes. So, and people don't want to stay at home all the time. They miss their friends and meeting with friends and so on. So changing the whole way of doing business. For example, if you are like with the video games, going to a pharmacy where you can meet with your friends and buy products and have them sent home, that's going to change the way we do business. And those are the things that we have to look as a board member, and implement immediately. So I think that is the way I see it. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you. Now, same question for Jose Gonzalez, and then we can wrap up and go to the audience questions. Thank you, Jose Gonzalez. I know that CMI has a number of committees. Can you talk a little bit about the structure of those committees, and especially the crisis committee, the response plan, and how they are?
Okay, thank you, Marta. Again, this is a very unprecedented situation, and I really believe we are all learning on the go. So what we have now may not be what we should have. And what we've been trying to do is, as Jose has been saying a lot, it's take quick decisions, adapt to the situation as quick as you can, and then try to make the best out of it. Thinking over this, I think there are three very critical things to address in a situation like this: is how do you provide leadership? How do you manage the crisis? And then how do you protect the future for everyone? And I really believe this has to start at the top. For us, being a family corporations, our shareholders have been at the forefront of the entire early and rapid response strategy to face the social and economic implication of this pandemic. As you just told in your comments after Mauro, Marta, as is with people, the true character of a company is really tested in the face of adversity. And that is where we are now. How well do we respond to the crisis, to our people and our stakeholders, is the best indicator to see if we are really true to the values that we say that we share and that we live by. So in this regard, the personal involvement of the family, shareholders and board members in the different social actions implemented was key from the beginning. With all the frustration that Mauro explained about not being able to be in the front line, we need our leaders to be present. Faced with uncertainty, people really need to see leadership. They need to see and hear from their leaders, and there are many, many ways to do that now with the technology that we have. So the board should take that responsibility primarily, but also empowering the organization to do their job and execute the strategy. through clear guidelines and protocols. And something really, really important is supporting and allowing the organization to take decisions. Having a shared vision in leadership should make sure that more than managing companies and taking care of the P&L of the balance sheet that we should be doing, we need to understand that we are really having a direct effect in the trust and hope of our coworkers and their families. We all need to feel safe, both with health, but also in our jobs too. And that is why we stress that we must be very honest and transparent, being with optimism, but also with a lot of clarity about the complexity of the moment and the real need to communicate this, to be very open about that, and sharing with the people that the roadmap that we are planning to go ahead and allow for the business to go forward. And so first thing, leadership. Second is managing the crisis. In our case, as I told you before, it meant organizing our response with a different structure, with a clear governance. Usually, as I would say, any crisis manual that we all have, it's a very clear a strategic committee, and then a crisis committee, and then maybe the very specific issue, we have a committee for that. That didn't work with this. So the board first decided to have weekly meetings to follow up closely the development of the crisis, approve decisions quickly, and focus on the long-term landscape of business. But we created a central crisis committee to coordinate actions and guidelines for all the corporation. We also formed a medical commission in support of this central committee. And we finally defined crisis committees for each country and each business in the country. This provided for a centralized strategy, but with local execution. And that provided the agility with a coherent response to all the things that we were seeing in each of the countries. Without doubt, an important role of the shareholders in this crisis has to be to ensure that we count with the best knowledge and awareness of the situation that we are facing. It is critical and important responsibility that in all this handling of the crisis, we always maintain a strict adherence to maintaining the family essence and the corporate values that really is the character of our company and the corporation. So yes, the board should be very involved with clear guidelines. They should be taking a look at the information, but I think the most important role is making sure that we are true to what we are and the principles of what we are and the value that we share. And I would say the third thing is to prepare for the future. The Central Crisis Committee took over all the preparations of the emergency and is handling the case-by-case issues. So what this allowed was for the business to put most of their energy and focus on the operations and the business continuity. Again, we all need to make sure that we have a shared vision of shareholder and the values that we have as the leaders of the business, so that when we are taking measures in the short term, they don't compromise the long-term viability of the business. We have to think beyond the crisis and imagining what is waiting for us. It's difficult to think that way now. If we go back 2 or 3 months, we will never, ever imagine having a webinar or as many webinars a week that we are having now, and not being able to go to the office and just work from home. And now we're 2 months into this, and who knows how much more time we will be on this. So we have to be creative. We have to adjust, and again, to provide for a process that is agile, quickly, that doesn't lose sight of the long term of the business. And when we have to take short-term decisions, that they are based on the principles of values of the company. Again, and I will end with this, there was a question about reputation. I really believe that if we take care of people, we are taking care of reputation. That's nothing more to say. But again, taking care of people, it's we have to consider them again as a whole, So it's both health, but also jobs. So it's taking care, being cautious, having the best preventative measures, but also making sure that these guys will have work, will have jobs, and there is a future after this. So we take care of people, we will take care of our reputation. Thank you, Marta.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we have roughly 10 minutes for questions. We received a number of questions here, and I have selected a few that I would like to comment on, and I grouped them in basically three topics that I think some people asked. First one is succession plans / contingency plans. I think both for, in terms of senior management, key personnel, as well as board. I think this is always a very touchy point, and the question is whether this is something, the opinion on your opinion on how to address this during the crisis. A second question is on compensation. On the one hand, board members are being demanded more meetings, more time, as well as leadership, more meetings, more time. It's crisis management. On the other hand, compensation is an issue because the company is under strain. So that's another question. And the third question is shareholders meeting being on a virtual basis. So by not only shareholders meeting, I would say everything is virtual now. The board meetings and everything, but the shareholders meetings are require specific regulation. So if anyone can comment on that. So those are the three questions.
May I go at the first one, Marta, about the succession on the boards? I think this crisis has really put that into perspective now, because what I believe is we're not ready for that. And what this has really allowed us to think about is that we need to be better prepared for that possibility. In a way, COVID has been an enabler of thinking that we are everyone is under the same threat. So usually the leaders, the founders, the family are really focusing on the business rather to think about who is coming after me. So this put a new perspective into that. The first practical thing on this is a lot of people on our board are over 60 or 65. So the frustration about not coming to business and being far away, as Mauro was saying, it's kind of a reminder of what the future is going to be, that they will need to be a little bit farther from the business. So more or less, we are all preparing for that succession. So my quick response to that is that we realize that we have to do better with that. We have to prepare better for that possibility, because that's something that many of us will maybe put aside because we don't want to think about the future without me. But we need to think about that now. And this is preparing us to do so.
Anyone else want to comment on succession or
Marta.
plan?
Yes.
I think. Go ahead, Jose.
No, Mauro, please.
Thank you. So what I think is key is first to reflect on whether we have the best board composition that we need. And too little effort has been put on that because to varying degrees, many boards are not yet relevant in the decision-making process of companies. So since some companies are making very good use of their boards because they do have a good board composition, meaning complementary skills, meaning independent members that can add value, I think other companies will look at that and say, well, this actually has its use, and it is a store of value, of experience, and works as a sounding board at least to add value to the company. So I have the hope that board composition will be improved in Brazilian companies. I think companies were much more advanced in terms of succession for executive positions. Again, family companies have more difficulty with that many times. But in relation to meetings, yes, I think we will have less in-person meetings for regular matters. We're going to use Zoom a lot, but I don't think we're going to travel less. Think a company like Eletrobras, which has a presence all over Brazil. The board has been meaning to visit operating units for many years now. We managed to make a board meeting at Angra dos Reis, the nuclear plant, but we have Itaipu, we have Tucuruí, we have others, we have Belo Monte. So I think directors will have more opportunity to visit operating facilities, to have some regular meetings between board members, because the personal interaction is important, but less than we were having before. And this will serve as a way to improve the readiness and the continued education of directors. The last question you mentioned regarding the virtual shareholder meeting, to be quite frank, Martha, this is less important to me than what actually goes on in the meetings. Until investors start asking difficult questions in these meetings regarding compensation, board structure, board composition, succession, risk management, shareholder meetings will remain irrelevant, be they in presential or virtual. So I don't think there's a lot of costs to be in shareholder meetings today. So what really needs to change is the role that investors have as gatekeepers to make sure that the boards are in check to provide the best governance structure.
Thank you, Mauro. Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment on compensation meetings?
Well,
I witnessed a company that had a shareholder meeting that lasted 2.5 minutes in April.
Yeah. Marta, regarding succession plan, I think that this has, as was already mentioned, but has become really a key issue. And I believe that having a formal review with the board, really having a development plan and implementing that development plan for the possible candidates that you have as a succession planning becomes really an important issue. Many times you are so focused on the daily work and whatever that you forget about those reviews and you don't give them the right importance. I remember in my times at Johnson & Johnson, that was basically one of the most important activities you have to have as a CEO and as a board. Make sure that there's a very complete plan, very well developed, very clearly identified and followed up, and with the proper formal reviews. In the case of compensation, well, I always believe that it should be fair and acceptable compensation. And this, in this situation of COVID-19, doesn't have to change that much regarding compensation if this is already something that's done properly. And regarding the shareholders meeting, doesn't obviously it could be much better if it could be one-to-one, well, with all the people meeting. But in the virtual meetings, I think that if they're well prepared and they're really good questions, and as Mauro was mentioning, the usefulness of the board and the decisions made by the board are going to be very important. So having virtual board meetings is not a main problem if the board is quite prepared and discusses the real important issues for the company. Thank you.
got to the end
From you.
of our session. So we will have to wrap up. And I would like to wrap up thanking again our panelists. I think we had a wonderful, fruitful discussion, very productive. I would like to thank everyone who stayed with us and asked the questions and participated, and everyone at the IDB Invest who made this possible. Again, the publication, COVID-19 and the Board of Directors, is available in our website. It touches on many of the subjects that we are discussing, that we discussed here. And this presentation was recorded, and the audio will be in our website as well. And I thank again everyone. I thank Gabriel Azevedo, and I hope to see you in our next webinar and leading to Sustainability Week. Thank you, Mauro, José Mora, José González, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Bye-bye, Mauro, José.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gabriel. Bye-bye.
Thank you, gracias.